Everybody have a seat if you could. This is a really exciting night for me for a bunch of reasons. First off, we haven't really done anything in this barn in almost a year ourselves. We haven't done any concerts or anything since last Christmas time. And so to be here gathered, well, there hasn't been much gathering going on. But we're glad to be gathering tonight. Mostly this barn is used on Sundays. For Sunday evening, we don't have a television, but my little girl has a great big television right here on Sunday evenings, and we do Sunday night Disney movies. So if anyone has any children who want to, well, first off, it requires you get rid of your television at home. Then you can come join us on Sunday nights, and we can have our own barn movie theater. This weekend, we're showing Cinderella. So that's at 6 p.m. on Sunday. But tonight, we're doing something really, really special. A friend of ours, feels like he's been a friend for a long time, although I've only known him for about maybe a year and a half. He's been in our lives, just like a lot of your lives, for a long time. He's inspired, encouraged, informed my wife and I for a long time. Maybe not that dark, because I can't see anybody. But he's been a real blessing to so many people, and it's a real blessing to have him here tonight. Y'all give a round of applause for Joel Salatin. Before we get started this evening, I'm going to get my friend Jared Black to come up and say a prayer, just to say a blessing upon this evening and this gathering, if you would. If you don't know Jared Black, he's one of the Black Boys. There's three of them. There's three brothers. They live in Columbia, and he's a tremendous, tremendous guy. And a couple years ago, you did a couple sermons in here, so I know you can pray. So would you mind praying for us?
Happy to. Yeah, let's pray. Father, thanks for the opportunity to be together tonight. Thank you, Lord, for this rare treat. I pray that you'd bless this evening, bless the speaking and the hearing and all that gets to transpire in the air when those unique things happen together. I pray that you would be with our families and be with us as a people as we love each other well. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Jared. So this is just really mostly folks from our community, Joel, that we've invited out. So I know some folks drove from Alabama. There's some folks here from Indiana. Thank you for driving all the way here. I texted them late this morning, and here they are. Anybody else come a long way besides Joel? He was in Miami this morning.
We were in West Palm Beach this morning.
Wow.
We drove. Did you fly?
Yeah, I flew.
He flew. He flew.
I was giving a speech this morning in Miami, so I didn't get away till afternoon.
Explain what you were doing in Miami, if you would. What the speech was for.
It was an annual rally called AMP Fest 2020. It's a kind of Christian conservative libertarian political thing, and they have about 50 speakers over the 4 days, and it was held at the Trump Doral. So
that's a nice place.
Trump got. Yeah, I slept in the Phil Mickelson suite. It's a golf resort thing, but they have some pretty heavy hitters, speakers, and then people like me. And well, I mean, for me, it was a bridge. I mean, I tend to not do political stuff very much, but I'd go to the Democrats if they invited me. So anyway. It was a good opportunity to build a bridge about food and farming issues to a group that usually just talks about abortion and immigration and taxation and things like that, which they're all important issues, but food and farming is a little more intimate and kind of hits us.
It does.
So it was good. It was good to bring that message to them.
You mentioned on the ride here that a little bit of what you spoke about. Could you tell them in particular just the idea that this year, the pandemic has created something that's been unheard of as long as you've been here.
Yeah, so what they wanted me to do was talk about the fragile versus resilient food and farming system, based on the fact that this spring the supermarket shelves were empty, and if you watch the news, you know that we destroyed however million chickens, however million pigs, and plowed down innumerable tons of lettuce and cabbages and squash and stuff as the big canneries and processors shut down due to COVID, and so what that did was it stimulated a home-centric theme in the culture, the likes of which I've never seen. I mean, not even during the hippie revolution of, the 1970s. And so, the backyard chicken movement, I mean, hatcheries were out of chicks. Garden seeds, people put in more gardens than the victory gardens of World War II. Seed companies were literally out. They couldn't package seeds fast enough. Many of them actually shut down orders for 2 weeks so they could just catch up with orders that they had. I mean, that's never happened in my lifetime. The huge, every podcast and every informational show that dealt with, baking bread, canning. I mean, you can't get canning jars. You couldn't get freezers. I mean, Lowe's and Home Depot were out of freezers for like 3 months. This is all part of domestic culinary, moving the pantry home instead of at Costco. And so to me, this was just a fantastic outcome that in a culture that has spent decades divorcing and disconnecting itself from home as a launch pad of life, and has cultivated a persona that home is simply a pit stop between important things where life happens outside the home, versus home being the grounding of a launch pad for a trajectory, to impact outside. That's a very, very positive outcome. And so home centricity in all of its aspects, now we're seeing a huge, I mean, all of these things, all the do-it-yourself, self-reliant stuff, home birth. I mean, I was just reading The Economist in the plane. When I travel, I catch up on my reading, and it was talking about midwives have seen a doubling. Midwives that used to deliver, have 60 clients, babies in the pipeline, this year have 150. It's more than double because women don't want to go to the hospital, for example. Pod schooling. You're all familiar with pod schooling. We had homeschooling, and now we've got pod schooling, as so many people have come to this that are intimidated by the responsibility of homeschooling. And so you get 3 or 4 families with similar age kids together, and they hire a teacher. And the teachers are all burned out. They don't want to do virtual learning anyway. And so, there's plenty of those. So, there's just really a movement in the land of home centricity that is, I think just a fantastic outcome for this catastrophe, and turning it into an opportunity that we haven't seen.
Speaking of catastrophe, you were telling a story about the speaker who was a boxer. Could you share a little bit of that? He was somebody else who spoke right before you.
Yeah, a guy named Joey Patrick. I'd never heard of him. If you watch professional boxing, probably aren't too many people here tonight that follow professional boxing. But anyway, he was a star. He was a world leader, U.S. champion, whatever. Made a lot of money as a not heavyweight, whatever the next one is, down. Middleweight. Yeah, welterweight's the little one.
I think so.
Yeah, they're like the horse jockeys that box.
Gabe.
If there's one occupation you want to be a little guy for, it's being a jockey. That's, and they all talk like this. Midway. And anyway, so he's an attorney now. He's retired from that. And he's an attorney now, runs an office, and both of his parents got COVID.
In Nevada, right?
In Nevada, and we're at death's door. His mother, had the look of death on her face, that they were both checking out. I mean, they were gone. And he knew a guy who knew a guy who knew a guy who could get him hydrochloroquine, whatever that thing is. Hydroxychloroquine, yeah.
The thing that my daughter says is nothing.
I'm not a broadcaster, so I haven't practiced this in front of a mirror so I could say it right. Like I have bovine spongiform encephalopathy. I've practiced that. So anyway, he got it was illegal, in Nevada. They'd shut it down. It's an illegal substance to give. But he knew a guy who got it. He was able to give it, and he gave it to both of his parents. And within 2 hours, his dad was up and fine and had no more symptoms. And his mother took her 6 hours, but she was up and jumping around and no problems after that. And as a result of that, he has now sued the governor and the health officials of Nevada for depriving the citizenry of health-giving options under constitutional whatever. And so anyway, it was some interesting stuff.
Well, one of the things, I'm going to ask some questions, and then we'll also, if someone has a question, you can raise your hand too. But I definitely want to talk about, for me and for a lot of us in the community, we get to talk to you about the things that are on our hearts. And I imagine our community is not much different than a lot of other communities. Right. But of course, just your take on the pandemic. What's your take after all the knowledge? Because we all read, we all know a lot, but your take. We're interested in your take on the pandemic, your take on masks. You had to wear a mask all the way here. Your take on mask and anything else that you'd like to share. Just your thoughts, what you've after all this time, what you've come to feel strongly about.
Well, I don't know how far you want me to jump off the cliff, but I'll just jump off the cliff at the outset and say I don't think that a health issue is the government's responsibility. Period. And what happens is when a culture arrogates to the government the responsibility for its health, it automatically gives over to an orthodox narrative and to experts and officialdom, the ability to prescribe what is correct and what's not, and more importantly, what's not correct, to guide the narrative, and essentially gives over its own ability to think through the situation. And so, I know we're heading up to an election, and I don't want this to be a partisan night at all, but the fact is, I don't care who's president, they're not responsible for my health. And as soon as I decide that the president is responsible for my health, it sets up a whole a kind of a philosophical and practical sequence of events that has big consequences. At our farm, the other part that I'll give, at our farm, we have a farm store. Some of you maybe have been there, and so we wrestled about what to do. And of course, we never closed. We never closed the store. And by the way, tonight, I don't know if this is illegal or not, what we're doing here tonight, but if we do get busted for being an illegal gathering, we'll just say it's a protest. Because protests are fine. So we could very quickly come up with 50 things we could protest. I mean, there's plenty of stuff we could protest. So we wrestled with, what do we do? What do we say? And so we have a big sign now on the door at the farm store. Everybody sees it. It's a big chalkboard, and it says masks. Your health, your body, your choice. You know, we live in a culture where you can choose your sex, you can choose to abort a baby, you can choose all sorts of things. We've never had so much choice as a people in our lives. And yet the flip side, been denied a lot of choice, where you can't buy a glass of raw milk from a neighbor, you can't sell a pot pie to a neighbor without an inspected kitchen. You know, and now you have to. You can't even. We've never decided what your work is essential and your work's not essential. How would you like to be a worker who's determined non-essential? Talk about affirmation, self-esteem, self-worth. Here we are struggling with that anyway in our culture, and to be told that your work is not essential. Our society doesn't need you. I mean, that's just and so suicides are up, domestic abuse is up. So my own feeling about masks is that if you expect this to protect you, I've got an oceanfront property in Arizona that I want to sell you. I mean, it's like the airplanes. You're in the airplane, and the seat, you push the button and the seat goes back. It goes back about this much, right? When you get ready to land, you've got to put it up. This is not safe. This is safe. Unsafe. Safe. And so I don't know how many of you have ever heard of Dr. Zach Bush. He's a kind of a neighbor of ours. We've done things together. He's probably one of the most eloquent on this whole thing. But these viruses, listen, Sally Fallon, Weston A. Price Foundation, if some of you are WAPers, Weston A. Price Foundation. She's just written a book, Is It Contagious? And she basically points out that the Spanish flu was not contagious. They actually injected Spanish flu viruses into healthy people and could never get anybody to get it. Spanish flu was 1918, which was really, really bad. Then the whole thesis of the unorthodox narrative, which by the way her book has been banned on Amazon. It's misinformation, so that's been censored. Like many of these, it's been censored because they can't let us think for ourselves. Thank you. And so the basic concept is there that viruses are actually not the problem. They are a symptom of your body addressing a weakness. So just imagine if, every time you see a traffic accident, I mean, this is the problem with cholesterol. You see, cholesterol is there with artery problems. It's not the problem. It's your body trying to lay on fat to heal the lesion that's in the blood vessel. So correlation and causation are real difficult to suss out sometimes. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite analogies for this or explanations for this is, for example, it's funny. Every time I see a traffic wreck on the highway, there's a state police and an ambulance there. Well, if we didn't have state police and ambulances, we wouldn't have any wrecks. That's correlation. Because they're there all the time at the same time, then it must be, but that's not causation. So, this whole correlation causation thing. So, there's another entire narrative, and I don't know whether it's true or not. I don't even know if it's contagious. I don't know, but I know one thing. Why can't somebody kind of gently nudge Dr. Fauci aside one time and say, some government official, and say, okay, America, here's what we're going to do. 1 week, we're going to work on our immune systems. So how are we going to do that? Well, let's see. For 1 week, nobody's going to drink Coca-Cola or Pepsi or Dr. Pepper or any sugary drinks, each of which has 16 teaspoons of sugar in it. So we're not drinking any soft drinks. We are not going to eat any junk food. We're not going to go to McDonald's. We're not going to go to Burger King. We're not going to eat any junk food. And we're going to eat all whole foods, preferably from your farmer. But if you can't, just eat, as Michael Pollan says, from the outside of the supermarket, not from the inside. All right, whole foods, things that you can, not whole foods like Whole Paycheck supermarket, but the whole foods like real unprocessed foods. Okay, so we're going to eat foods that you can pronounce. If there's something on the label that you can't pronounce, don't eat it. All right, we're going to do that for a week. And then what else we're going to do? Okay, we're going to drink between 2 and 3 quarts of water every day, because every American is dehydrated. Okay, so we're gonna hydrate ourselves. So we get the 4th state of water, which is gel in our cells. We're gonna get it to work. And then let's see what else we'll do. We'll get 8 to 8.5 hours of sleep a night. No late night with David Letterman. We're gonna in fact, probably turn off the TV for a week would be a good one. We're gonna get 8 to 8.5 hours of sleep a night, and we're gonna once a day for 20 minutes we're gonna work up a sweat. Don't care how. You can run in place. You can do yoga. But for 20 minutes a day we're gonna work up a sweat. So you those toxins and things that you get them out of your system, and you're gonna spend 20 minutes a day in the sunshine. Go out and get some vitamin D. Get some good sunshine on you, and then. The final thing we'll do, this is kind of my recipe, the final thing we'll do is make a list of all the people that you hate or dislike, and then forgive them all. That'll be the last thing. And all American, can you imagine somebody saying this on from the White House and saying, "Are you with me, America? Are you with me? Let's make America well again." And Mawa. Okay.
Mawa.
And or H healthy. Make Maha. Make America healthy again. That sounds like something out of Hawaii. Mahali, Mahuma. Anyway, can you imagine somebody saying that as a national initiative, imperative, instead of saying, "Well, we're all just going to wait around for the vaccine. We're all just going to wait around for the vaccine." Wouldn't that be amazing if something like that would be leadership? And so
some of my friends were telling me that you were on Joe Rogan again not very long ago, and one of everyone's favorite parts was when you explained one of your the things you do to help your immunity system. Could you tell people that who don't know?
Well, one thing, for 40 years I've taken a zinc supplement, and zinc is that's one thing that pretty much every wellness practitioner says is kind of the that and magnesium are kind of the two nuclei of your immune system. And in fact, Spain just recently finished a study on March and April's mortalities of COVID in Spain, and they found that the people who died with COVID averaged 43, and I'm going to get over my skis here, just trust me, the number's 43 units of some sort of zinc per deciliter of blood. And the ones who did not die averaged 63 units. Normal is 70. And they found that every 1 unit increase equaled 7% better chance of surviving. That's huge. That's huge. That's so simple. Everybody's cowering here waiting for a vaccine. Why can't somebody take the initiative and say, let's do, you always say pick the close fruit first. Why don't we pick some close fruit first? And you know what the number one food source of zinc is? Red meat. But no, what do we have in the schools? Meatless Mondays. We have a whole, the U.S. the whole U.S. dietary guideline is all about eating, Ritz crackers and Cheerios on the foundation instead of and reducing your intake of meat. So anyway, so I take a zinc supplement. But one of the things that I do, as a farmer, and I've got my calluses and splinters. My life inherently exposes me to a lot. Everybody remember your grandmother saying you should eat a pound of dirt before you're 12? I mean, how many? Lots, right? And so, I'm in manure all the time. I'm in compost. I'm in dirt. One of the things I do on purpose is routinely drink out of the cow trough with the cows. The cows are drinking here, slobbering, all this stuff. And I just get down there like a cow and just drink right out of the cow tank with the cows. And it's literally on purpose to build my microbiome. I mean, our problem is that we have so simplified our microbiome that it doesn't have the diversity that it needs. And now we know that we also have not only a microbiome, but a subset of our microbiome is our virome. That's the new word, virome, and that's what this virus thing is about. So is your virome actually fully functional? And one of the best ways to get your microbiome up is to diversify your diet with. Here's the thing: you can't have a fully complemented microbiome and eat a simple diet, or eat food from a simple soil. So there are 7 billion microorganisms, 7 billion microorganisms in one handful of healthy soil. Okay? But what we've done with chemical fertilizers is that we have simplified that soil and said, well, this is just nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. We're still stuck with Austrian, biochemist Liebig, and so Justus von Liebig, and so in 1837 he came to the world and told the world that all of life is just a rearrangement of nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, and developed the chemical fertilization idea, and we're still practicing that. So we're now literally decades and decades into simplifying the soil rather than feeding the biology of the soil and letting the complexity of the biology create the complexity of the soil. And so what's happened is, as we've simplified the soil, we've simplified the enzyme and nutrient structure of the plants, which then create a simplified animal or egg or milk, and create a simplified gut microbiome. And we now know that our brain and our gut are completely one. They are totally linked. And so it's not a stretch for me to realize that as we have simplified the soil and gone to monoculture feeding of animals, we have now simplified our gut, which has simplified our brains, which means we're incapable of complex thought because we don't have a complex microbiome anymore. I mean, I need a nuance of plantain. I need a nuance of chicory somewhere in here. There's something in me that says I need nuance of plantain. Well, if I'm just feeding cows corn and soybeans, where's the plantain? In our grass-finished beef and our diversified perennial pastures, the original prairies had more than 40 species of plants per acre. And in fact, my mentor, Alan Nation, who founded Stockman Grass Farmer, said it takes 100 years when a field is plowed one time, one plowing of a field, it takes 100 years for the habitat, the soil climate, to reattract and regerminate all of the original species of plants that were in that field. That's how drastic one plowing is on a field. And so on our farm, we're just 60 years into it, but we're seeing incredible diversity just exploding in the last 10 years of things that I've never seen before, and it's just accelerating. And so I know that our beef, for example, those cows are getting nuance of plantain, nuance of chicory, nuance of Dallas grass, okay, all these new things. What does that do? I mean, can I taste it? No, I'm not that sophisticated. But my bacteria inside, they are that sophisticated. And they're requesting that kind of diversity. And when you realize the average Australian Aborigine ate 3,000 different kinds of food. 3,000 different kinds of food. The average American eats about 20. And we only eat like 9 different kinds of vegetables. Cucumbers, tomatoes, peppers, lettuce. It's pretty simple. And if you just go back to, for example, Dolly Madison's cookbook, Dolly Madison or Martha Jefferson, either one, they've got cookbooks out. You can get them at Montpelier and Mount Vernon. You can probably get them online too. But if you look through those cookbooks, 70% of the ingredients, they're plants. We don't even know what they are. I mean, currants and gooseberries, and it's a whole litany of stuff that we don't have today. So we've really allowed ourselves to slide down this very simplistic, slippery slope where we're not feeding our microbiome, and we're actually denying our body's immune system an ability to be exposed. If you're familiar with the hygiene hypothesis that many allergists, doctors they've signed on to this document of the hypothesis says that your immune system is like a big muscle. And if you don't exercise it, it becomes lethargic. This was part of the, unspoken between the lines stuff of Guns, Germs, and Steel, the New York Times bestseller Guns, Germs, and Steel, talking about the ascendancy of, how many of you have read that book? It's why some civilizations ascended and some descended or were conquered by others, and Guns, Germs, and Steel. And the part about germs was that the reason that the Western cultures, well, not just Western, but the Israelite, the cultures that dominated the world were ones that had proximity to domestic livestock. And the ones that got conquered were the ones that didn't have domestic livestock because they didn't have as broad a base of immunological function. So I'm concerned that today, raising kids in a sterile environment with no more exercise than video games, because we've deemed that all child work is abuse. It's all, it's all abusive to children. That we're actually depriving our children, and they're entering adulthood with an extremely compromised, lethargic immune system. So as soon as something comes along, boom, they're asthmatics or they're suffering. So, long answer to a short question, but yeah, I mean, I work at, walking to pasture, chewing on an odd weed, eating a seed, and plunging my hands into the compost pile. It's good, And then I walk around all day with dirty hands, with compost. How many microbes on them? And then, eat an apple. I mean, I just picked a bushel of apples off the apple tree in the backyard. Some of them have a little streak of bird poo on them. I won't wash it off. I'll eat it. It's good. It's good for you. It doesn't have any spray. Listen, I'll take that over pesticide. Okay? Yeah. I'll take that over pesticide. So, there you are.
So,
and I haven't, to my knowledge, I have not even had a cold, flu, nothing. I've never had a headache in my life. I don't know what a headache is. And I haven't missed one day of work for 15 or 20 years. And I'm not bragging. I'm paying homage graciously and humbly and thankfully to a creator's design that is so infinitely beyond anything that we can explain or imagine. And so our mandate is not to adulterate it, compromise it. It's to just appreciate it. And how do I snuggle down and nest harder into this abundant ecological umbilical that a gracious God has given to me?
Yeah. I don't want to head down a super political road, but we do have an election coming. We were talking about this on the drive a little bit. And something's going to change one way or another. I mean, things are going to happen one way or another. And we sort of all have nobody knows. No one knows anything. But so much has changed this year. So you were talking about civilizations and the length of time and where we are in that. Right. But even more so, I'd love your opinion as whether we should be thinking about that things could change. Just like now, for me, and I think a lot of people here, for the first time, the grocery stores being empty of more than just toilet paper or milk or something because there's a storm, or the winter storm's coming in. It was a wake-up call that just reminds us that this isn't just a hobby. Like, this is important stuff. But what's your feeling about the importance of families and communities starting to get ready? So that question, and to find its way all the way to the book you mentioned earlier.
Oh, the Benedict
called Agrihood.
Oh, Agrihood.
But to find our way towards that.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah. So you might not be surprised. Rory prepped me for this tonight. So on the ride from the airport,
I asked a lot of questions.
Dry ran some of this stuff. So the thing is, yeah, you're right. Regardless of who wins, there's how many of you are a little bit uncertain what December is going to look like? I don't know about you, but I feel like January was like 10 years ago, and I feel like December is still 10 years away. It's just you just kind of feel like, I feel like the whole country is like a stirred up beehive. When you like rattle a beehive, like a wasp nest, and all those wasps that are sitting there on that nest, like on the back porch, up on the right top of the back porch, they're all just sitting there, quiet, and you go and you bang on the wood and you disturb them, and all of a sudden all of them are, their wings are up and they're all just right there. I feel like that's the way our culture's on edge. Everybody's just kind of here. And so the question is, well, what does happen? Of course, people have been predicting the end forever. I still have my dad's books that he collected in the 70s about the coming economic collapse and how to prepare for, the all this. And we don't know, but there certainly seems to be a lot of signs, when the stimulus money runs out, the unemployment, the funny money that's been printed, trillions and trillions of dollars just thrown into no culture's ever done that without hyperinflation. Of course, hyperinflation destroys 401ks, pensions, everything else. I have not yet heard Dave Ramsey talk about this. I would love to hear him talk about this. I think he's still telling everybody to put your money in 401ks and stock market. And I'm just not sure. So the question is, well, what is the most secure investment? What can you do to protect? And so I've come to the conclusion that the best investment is to invest in skill, practical knowledge. I'm saying practical knowledge, not just knowledge. Practical knowledge, how to do stuff. And then relationships. And what that does then is, if you invest in that, you kind of, gather to yourself a community of people that know how to build things, fix things, and grow things. So if your equity is in relationships, mastery, and practical knowledge, and your support group knows how to build things, fix things, and grow things, those are all things. Those are all things that can't be foreclosed on. They can't be, even gold can be stolen, or you can't eat it. You can't live under it. And so that moves you to a non-physical equity that moves you outside the purview of government control, tyranny, whatever. And so you start creating kind of, community resilience then, neighborhood resilience. One of the things there's a book out, I haven't gotten it yet, I just found out about it. The title is Agrihood. And it's I mean, I'm aware people are calling me, they're starting to put together, I call them agrarian bunkers, but that sounds like it's real, paranoid and negative. But it's the same idea. The same idea is if you're going through calamity and catastrophe, the best security you can have, I mean, besides knowing where you go at the end of life, the best security you can have is actually surrounding yourself with people who know how to grow things, build things, and fix things.
And there are people getting together
and there are people specifically getting together looking for those, whatever those skill sets, all right, and putting together communities. And that's probably a wise thing to do.
I love that. Can we talk about social media? Just, it's...
What's social media?
I know you've felt the impact of social media.
Mm-hmm.
And these things that are going on, we were talking about earlier that if you could have your own newspaper, another life. I try to live this way quite a bit, which is I only really see my community. I don't pay any attention to anything outside of it.
Right.
And but you were talking about like what social media has done, and and just I'd love to get your thoughts on that, because we're all drawn into something much bigger than we realize we are, and we're being fed a diet of all kinds of things that really have nothing to do with.
Yeah, well, Stephen Covey in his blockbuster book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, one of the habits is stay within your sphere of influence. And he drew these three concentric circles. And, he said, the inner circle is what you can influence. The second circle is periphery, and then the outside circle is what you can't influence. And his point was that if you focus yourself on that inner circle, what you can influence, your actual circle of influence grows. But if you focus your attention on the outside rim of that, things that you can't really do anything about, then your actual influence shrinks. It's a pretty fascinating concept. And so, as I think our temptation to be drawn into, it's a lot easier to solve a problem that's on the outside of that circle than what's on the inside of that circle. It's a lot easier to get fired up about, the Chinese or cybersecurity or immigration or, some of these issues, But if we actually concentrate within our sphere of influence, our own families, our own situation, our own resiliency, what happens is that expands our leadership and our, well, my dad used to call it pulling on a string. You can't push on a string. He said you have to pull on a string. So you have to lead by example. And so if you have an example that is magnetic, that is beautiful, that people are attracted to, you can't do that and solve all the world's problems at the same time. How many people are devoted to solving the world's problems, and they're divorced, their kids are wherever, their personal life is a shambles because they've given over to this cause, whether it's building a big business, whatever it is, and have neglected that inner circle. But people who really capture that inner circle, they become immortalized. The world wants to follow them. There's not a millionaire businessman in the country with a collapsing marriage and family that wouldn't give all the money away if he could get the adoration of his wife and his kids back.
Do you guys want to, let's do some questions from people here in the community.
Not that women can't have businesses. Oh man, I can just see that. Social media. Yeah. Oh my.
Come on, this is your opportunity to ask Mr. Salatin a question. We would love, anybody, everybody. Yes, ma'am.
Great question. Did everybody hear the question? This is a pretty small room, so you probably heard it. Nature sanitizes two ways. There are two ways that nature sanitizes. One is with rest and sunlight. Rest and sunlight. So that's the animal movement thing. We move the animals around, rest and sunlight. The other one is with vibrant decomposition. So obviously the ideal of that is a compost pile. All right, vibrant decomposition. But there's also vibrant decomposition in the soil. How do you get vibrant decomposition in the soil? Well, you feed it organic matter, and you build up the earthworms, the actinomycetes, and the mycelium, and that's fed by carbon. Okay, so in general, one of the beauties of all vibrant decomposition is that it acts as nature's Alka-Seltzer to upsets. My favorite story on this was the Lufke farm in Austria. Some of you are old enough to remember when Chernobyl blew, the nuclear reactor in Russia, Chernobyl. Mm-hmm. And that nuclear cloud went down across Belarusia and ended up kind of finishing up falling in Austria in the truck farming region of Austria. A lot of vegetables, especially cabbage, they're Austrians. And so they went in and with Geiger counters to measure the radioactivity. And there were obviously thousands of tons of vegetables destroyed in that. But there was only one farm in the whole region that did not have any radioactivity in their soil. Now they lost their crop, but all the other farms had radioactivity residual in the soil. These guys didn't, Lufke's. And it's because for 30 years they had been applying compost, and they had all this humus, this organic matter, Alka-Seltzer, all right, as a buffering agent because of the vibrant decomposition. It broke down that radioactivity literally overnight. And it never could get. It's a little bit, I found that's a Joe Rogan program. So when I went out there, he was testing everybody for COVID. They said, "You mind?" I said, "No, I don't mind, I'm fine." So he brought his doctor buddy in, and he pricked my finger, and it was an antibody test. And I was negative. I said, "Oh, okay, so I haven't had it." He said, "Oh, no. He said, "No, you have skin T cells." He said, "If you'd had it in your blood, it would have meant that it had to penetrate your skin. But if your skin surface is a good enough immune system, it'll never penetrate your skin. It'll never get in your blood." Well, that's pretty amazing. So it's a little bit like the Lufke's found. Soil is the earth's skin. And if the skin is good enough, if it's vibrant enough, it'll withstand all sorts of attacks. Even pesticide, chemical residue. A lot of people are scared of arsenic, for example, that's left over from old orchards. That's one of the assays that organic farmers do. They buy a piece of land, they do an arsenic assay to make sure there was no, an orchard, to make sure there was no orchard there, and if there is, then they do an arsenic assay. And so all of these things can be buffered out and detoxed with organic matter, with carbon. Carbon is nature's, carbon water filters. Carbon wants to attach to everything. The carbon, atom, it wants to attach to everything. And so, that's why intravenous chelation therapy. It's like charcoal Roto-Rooter in your veins, that's what it works. It's carbon-based. So, we know there are all these carbon-based things and for detox. And carbon's a sponge. And in the soil, it feeds the earthworms and the biological activity, which then in turn purify. The nematodes, they rise to the occasion. Fungi, all the little molds, they all rise to the occasion. And so as you bring in material from outside, just be aware, ideally you would compost it all. Like if you're bringing in poultry litter from a CAFO, from a concentrated animal feeding operation, ideally you would compost that first. And it's usually coming in at about 7-to-1 CN ratio. So you're probably going to have to cut it about 50% by volume with carbon. It's going to take some carbon. Wood chips, sawdust, junk leaves, moldy hay, corn fodder, peanut hulls, cotton ginning trash, okay, anything that's brown, all right, and let it go through the compost process, and then spread it, and then you'll be okay. But compost even breaks down, antibiotics, herbicides, all sorts of cool stuff. So composting is really it's a wonderful thing. Yeah.
More questions?
Did I scare everybody with the long answer?
So following up on that a little bit, I follow a guy on Twitter, and his name is escaping me at the moment, but he was one of the founders of Greenpeace.
Mm-hmm.
And he eventually left Greenpeace because they went so far radical left.
Yeah, I know him.
Patrick.
Yeah, we've done conferences together. Yeah, first time I met him, we sat at a banquet table. It was out in British Columbia. We were doing a conference together, and they sat us together at this banquet table. And I'd never met him. I didn't know who he was. And so I sat down here. He sat down there. There's these round tables. There's 5, 6 people around it. And I sat down and I said, "Hi, I'm Joel Salatin." He said, "Yeah, I'm Patrick. And why do you want to kill 1 million? Why do you want to make 1 million Vietnamese children blind?" Nice to meet you too, And so we had an interesting conversation. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So he talks a lot about, he basically spends most of his time fighting climate change alarmists. But he talks about the importance of carbon dioxide and how eons ago there was so much more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere than there is now. Yet that's all everybody ever talks about. And cattle, of course, are vilified for it. And you talk about the importance of organic soil and the consumption of methane. And so I'm curious about your thoughts. It seems to be a little bit contradictory in one sense, but also not in another sense. So yeah, I'm just curious about your thoughts on climate change and the beef contribution to that.
Okay.
And is it really that bad?
No. No, in this case, Patrick and I would be in agreement. But he loves genetically modified organisms, and of course, the golden rice, which is what he was talking to me about. we don't agree on. But on this, now, the interesting thing about climate change is that none of the models have been able to function in reverse. Every single computer model that has put us, at extinction in 20 years or whatever it is, when they run it backwards, we're all extinct 200 years ago. So technology can only lead you so far. And here again, this is one that I don't know. I know looking at global pictures, there's no question the ice caps have melted. I mean, I was in Alaska 2 years ago and ran on an interstate that was built where there was a glacier 40 years ago. So that something is happening, but is it new? We don't know. Has it ever happened before? We don't know. We know that 1,000 years ago, the planet carried way more animal weight, including humans. If we just say humans included in the animal weight category, the planet carried way more pounds of animal 1,000 years ago than it does today, with Tyson chicken houses, John Deere tractors, and chemical fertilizer. Now that should give us all pause to realize that the Earth's abundance is not tied to 10-10-10 fertilizer or John Deere tractors. It must be tied to something else. Is there a way that we can resurrect? Is there a way that we can domestically, commercially resurrect whatever templates those were that created that abundance back then? So how was that done? And interestingly, herbivores only ate plants. They didn't eat corn, they didn't eat soybeans, and they didn't eat any fermented feeds like silage, because an herbivore is a fermentation tank. So when you feed it fermented feeds, it acidulates the rumen, doubles the methane, and it gives the cow acidosis. So the two kinds of animals that can eat fermented feeds are are pigs and chickens, the two kind of domestic livestock, because they do dig into the anaerobic layer where there is fermented stuff. So, and us, sauerkraut, wine, okay, that's ferment. We do very well on fermented stuff. Herbivores don't. They want to take it in and ferment it themselves, like fine wine. So they are pruning fresh vegetation. They're not eating dead cows and chicken manure like we feed herbivores. They're not eating monocultures, and they're actually pruning on an extremely complex, highly diversified plantscape. Okay? And when a diversified plantscape exists, I've never used the term plantscape, but everybody can follow. That's not a word, but everybody's following me, right? A diversified plantscape. And we could say prairie if you wanted to. But a diversified plantscape has, it stimulates the production of a methanotrophic bacteria. You can look it up, methanotrophic bacteria. And this methanotrophic bacteria in a healthy prairie or multi-diversified perennial ecosystem, the methanotrophic bacteria reaches out and grabs methane that's equivalent to the methane produced by more than 1,000 cows per acre. Now, nobody's ever going to put 1,000 cows per acre on the landscape, all right? So it's overkill. It's plenty. The problem is that very, very little acreage devoted to herbivores, domestic livestock, is a healthy perennial prairie ecosystem. It doesn't grow under corn, monocultures. It doesn't grow under overgrazed land. It doesn't grow under asphalt. It doesn't grow in feedlots or factory farms or lawns with bahia grass, okay? It requires a diversified plantscape. So the problem is that the scientists who study these things study extremely dysfunctional ecosystems and then extrapolate data from the dysfunctional ecosystem. Just imagine if you and I lived on Pluto and we're looking down at the Earth, interesting planet down there. I wonder what kind of education system they have. I wonder how smart their kids are. Maybe we could learn something from them. So the mayor of Pluto says, need 2 volunteers to go down and study the education system on Earth. So you and I, we raise our hands, we jump in the flying saucer, we head down to Earth. And we land in the worst school district with the worst school superintendent, in the schoolyard of the worst school, and go visit the school with the worst principal, the classroom with the worst teacher, and the kids with the worst parents. And we get our data. And we run back to Pluto. Well, what'd you find out? Well, man, if that's the way you educate, it'd be better not to have an education system, right? And that's exactly what's happened with the scientific community with our current dysfunctional farming system, is a completely inappropriate dysfunctional database. So, when documentaries like Cowspiracy come on and impugn feedlots for cattle, I'm sitting there saying, amen, amen, preach it. But the solution is not veganism. The solution is bringing back the herbivores' function in the ecoscape of moving, mobbing, mowing that they exhibited since creation. That was the function that they had. And if you violate any of that 3-legged stool, moving, mobbing, mowing, if you violated either any one of those 3 legs, you've turned an asset into a liability. And the fact is that almost no herbivore domestic livestock in the world honors all 3 of those. And much of it adulterates all 3. Some of it violates 1, some of it violates 2, and some of it violates all 3. And so a dysfunctional system will move you to this place. As far as planetary, so what's my take on planetary temperature, regulation, whatever? I'll say 2 things. I grew up in the 60s and 70s where the entire scientific community, the consensus, the narrative, the scientific narrative was that by now we were going to be entering an ice age. We were all going to freeze. And we saw all the movies in science classes, that by now the canopy is going to get polluted and it's going to block out the sun. We're all going to freeze. We're going to go into ice age. Now, of course, we're all going to burn up. So when I see these kinds of things, I look, well, is there something common? Is there a common ground? You know what the common ground is on both of those? The common ground was that was carbon in the soil. That was the common ground. Where was the carbon? Was it in the atmosphere or was it in the soil? And so, you know what? I don't know whether we're going to burn up or freeze up. But I know one thing. On my little niche of God's creation, I am cultish about putting organic matter in the soil. And in 60 years, we've moved ours from an average of 1% organic matter to 8.2% organic matter, farm-wide. And when you realize that every 1% increase in organic matter, another kind of, it's a close cousin to carbon. So if you say, oh, we shifted from carbon to organic matter, they're kissing cousins, okay? If they were in West Virginia, they could get married. So hope there's nobody from West Virginia. So no, we love West Virginia. All right, we love to take their money. All right, so you know, if that's what's happening, every 1% increase in organic matter increases water retentive capacity in the soil by 20,000 gallons per acre. 20,000 gallons per acre. So that means today on our farm, 7 percentage points of organic matter, 7 times 20,000 is 140,000. Oh, you had the same math teachers we did. Good. 140,000 gallons times 100 acres. Now that'll push you a little bit, okay? Yeah, but it's millions of gallons, okay, of water that we can hold today, which means less flooding, less drought damage, okay, and longer a sustained activity of the biological community in the soil, which shuts down if it gets either too wet, too dry, or too cold, okay? So that, again, becomes the buffer. So, again, we come to my little sphere of influence. That's something I can do. I can do that in my backyard. I can do that on our farm. I can put attention on carbon in the soil. That's one. The second part of this is there's an Australian scientist guru, probably we've done conferences together. The first time I heard him, I was one of those just open mouth, spellbound on my seat. You know, when you hear something that sounds like truth, it just resonates with you and it just makes sense. And he's an Australian, Walter Jenney, and he kind of leads the whole science. And there's a whole group of scientists that follow this now. That the temperature regulator of the planet has nothing to do with greenhouse gases, GHGs. That's the one you always see, right? GHGs, greenhouse gases. It's all about water condensation. What they've determined is that only 5% of planetary temperature is regulated by GHGs. 95% is the calories, the energy it takes to condense water, to take water from vapor to water, to liquid, okay? Well, in order to condense, water has to have a particle to condense on. It can't just condense on nothing. It has to find something to condense on. Most of what it can condense on, ice crystals, which is kind of the basis of cloud seeding and that sort of thing. But the main thing it condenses on is bacteria. The bacteria that's an exudate from foliage. Okay? So leaves are out here, and they, you know, if you ever know, I mean, Smoky Mountains. I mean, in the early morning, you know, these clouds that come up over these fields and forests, okay? That's it happens at our place. It happens every place where there's foliage. When you have the temperatures are right for condensation. And so that helps to explain why in climate change, again, I'm not going to die on this hill. I'm just going to give you the narrative is that the dry areas are getting drier and the wet areas are getting wetter, okay? And so we're seeing, and that a lot of people say, well, you know, how can that be? That doesn't make sense. Well, if you go to the condensation theory of planetary, it's basically a big radiator. So the physics of the planet is it wants to be balanced. And so if you plow and you overgraze and you create deserts over here, the plant's got to cool itself somewhere. So guess what? It's going to condense more over here where there's vegetation. And so you get this cycle of where you get places where it's like here, where it gets wetter, and the places that are dry get drier. And to me, it just and of course he's got every kind of graph and, technical thing. But to me, that makes sense. And so, again, we're all into how do we grow more vegetation? How do we get more foliage? How do we get more leaves? How do we get more, biomass? We're all into biomass. I mean, it's funny. We lease several farms in the community, and we're all about diversified biomass and lots of biomass. So our fields are not always, they're not clean, bluegrass type fields. They've got chicory and goldenrod and plantain and even some thistles and burdock and sourdock and all sorts of stuff in them. And sometimes landowners they don't like the weeds. And Dan and I walk out in them, and we're walking out in vegetation up to our shoulders, full of spiders. The ground cover is full of moles and voles and little field mice, and there's just this there are birds and red-winged blackbirds, and there's just this plethora of life. And we're saying, man, look at all this and the landowner's saying, weeds. Well, if a cow eats it, we don't call it a weed. Maybe it's a nuance of plantain that she needs. And so we do everything possible to try to stimulate the amount of leaf cover, the leaf area index, LAI it's called, leaf area index per square foot, knowing not only does that grow more cows, healthier cows, all that stuff, but it also is part and parcel of this whole bacterial exudate that comes in the atmosphere that gives the vapor a place to condense and creates balance within the ecosystem and helps the planet maintain its temperature.
Makes sense.
Short answers. Yeah, short answers.
Let's do a couple more questions, and then we're going to, Joel's been flying all day today trying to get here. Yes, Miss Jan?
All right, great question. So most of the invasives are opportunistic. So we believe that all vegetation that you have is a physical manifestation of the management that's been done there for, well, I said, one plowing 100 years, okay? So you can go back as far as you want to, but essentially, whatever you have there is a physical a manifestation of a map of a management map, okay, that you've been doing. All right, and so we tend to rather than fight what we don't like, we manage for what we want. There's a big difference between managing what you want and spending all your time fighting what you don't want. And if you put all your effort on managing for what you want, what you don't want will become more and more scarce. Okay? So that has spiritual repercussions and all sorts of things, all right? So Sericia lespedeza, for example, I can remember when we had several large patches of that, 35, 40 years ago. And so the management tool that we use is we move the cows every day. So we confine them in a little tiny spot, and you can do this whether you've got 1,000 head or 2 head. And we move them every day. We only give them enough of what they'll eat in one day. What that does is it moves your pounds of animal per acre up. And as you move your pounds of animal per acre up, you get succession. So every ecosystem is either succeeding to something better or it's degenerating to something worse. An ecosystem is never static, okay? So it's your management that determines, is this moving toward a better place or away from a better place, getting worse. And so anybody that has land or stock, my first question is, are you moving them every day? Because moving them every day will put you into this monitoring and moving and mobbing category that will enable. We don't have time tonight to go into it. If you want to read my book, Salad Bar Beef. But it will put you into a place where the ecosystem will begin to reflect a different management style. We don't have any Cerisa Lespedeza now. I remember as a child when I was 9, 10, every day Dad would go to work, and my brother and I, he was 3 years older than I was, and we had a chalkboard downstairs, still have it in the dining room, and he would leave our list, summer vacation, out of school, summer vacation, yeah. He'd leave our list of stuff to do, and every single day was spend 1 hour chopping thistles, every single day. And so we'd go out with hoes, we'd chop thistles, and you'd have thought we were raising them as a crop. Today, you can hardly find any, and so now you can say, well, that was fighting against what you don't want. Yeah, but we were also, we had a vision, we had a plan, and that was before we were moving the cows every day too. Once we started moving the cows every day, we didn't have very many thistles. But invasives can indicate an imbalance in the soil. You could put on too much of something, not enough something. Pugging damage, that can happen. We do that from time to time. In New Zealand, they call that deep massage. We pugged up one of our rental farms. We got 3 inches of rain one night. We had a herd of about 400 over there, and they were pretty tight. And we got 3 inches of rain one night. And we went in the morning. It looked like we'd plowed the field. They had just destroyed that thing. So when the spring came, this was in the winter. In the spring came, it was nothing but weeds, like 12-acre field. It was 100% weeds. There was not a grass plant in the place. But we didn't spray, we didn't mow, we didn't do anything. We just did our thing. The cows ate what they wanted to, trampled the rest in. The second year, it was the prettiest stand of pure Timothy you've ever seen in your life. We never planted a seed. We never did anything. For some reason, that biannual result was Timothy, not a weed in the place. It looked like we'd plowed it and planted the Timothy, and we never did anything. So I'm just telling you that the response, the ability for nature to respond to a change in management is almost beyond your wildest imagination. So focus your attention there. Don't get caught up in the weeds, all right? Get caught up in managing for where you want to go, and it'll respond in kind.
Any more questions? Yes, ma'am.
So I've grown up farming, but bucking the system, moving away from conventional agriculture. And so this is our first year to branch off to offer things to the public. Took a leap and joined 2 farmers markets instead of 1. But we survived. So it is my vision to bring my husband home from work. So that
Great.
our farm is our life.
Yes.
Okay, so if you could go back to when you started selling to the public, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give to, like the nugget you would give to a brand new farmer that's opening up to the public?
The number one thing is to build a team. So make a list of what you're good at and what you're not good at. Your strong suits and your weak suits. Not a single one of us is strong at everything. And farmers notoriously are not good marketers. Most of us farmers, I mean, we're farmers because we don't like people, you know. Now, I'm unusual. I get that, all right. But the more I travel around the world, do seminars, the more I realize how unusual I am in that respect, that I'm theatrical and have a gift of gab, and am also got calluses and enjoy the farm. That's kind of unique. It's not totally unique, but it's unusual. Let's just say it's unusual. And so for me, it wasn't finding a marketer. For me, it was finding somebody, for example, who would do part-time mechanic work. So instead of me being out there at 11 o'clock at night trying to fix a machine, which I do, but I don't enjoy, and I'm not real good at it, you know, welding or whatever. Instead, I could be in at the house telling my story, getting 3 more customers, generating twice as much as it would cost me to have a team member, some part-time neighbor, friend, whatever, fixing something, all right? And so I think if there's one weakness that virtually all entrepreneurial, sole proprietorship, you know, startups suffer under, including me, was we're so bound and determined to do it all ourselves. And, you know, it's going to be me and Matilda and nobody else, you know. I don't want nobody else on the payroll. I can't even afford myself. I mean, name your thing, okay? Now, for most farmers, that weakness is marketing. And that's why I bring it up. For most farmers, that weakness is marketing. And so getting somebody who, you know, can sell a hat rack to a moose, and loves people, and jawing with people, and storytelling, and putting them on commission. You don't have to put them on a payroll. Performance, commission, okay? That way you rise and fall together, okay? So you want equal stakeholders. You don't want employees. You know, we don't have, you know, we've got 20 on our team and nobody gets an hourly rate. I don't believe in hourly wages. I think it creates all sorts of problems. That's another whole topic for another whole evening. But get partners that are strong where you're weak. So sit down, honestly look at yourself and say, you know, what floats my boat? What gets me up in the morning? What do I really enjoy? Make that list. Now, what does the business really need to thrive? And you make that list. And then you go out and you try to find. As my son Daniel says, he says, you know, the thing is, there are things that you get up in the morning and you say, oh man, I really don't want to do that today. You know, it's on my list and I got to do it, but I really don't like to do it. There's probably somebody within 5 miles of you that can't wait to get up in the morning and do that very thing. So this is not selfish. It's actually very charitable to create a habitat to allow somebody else to feel their passion, see, and to express their Tomness or Maryness or whatever it is, okay? And so team building, I think, is probably one of the single biggest weak links that all of us, including farmers, face as we start our little entrepreneurial enterprises.
Last one.
So I'm not a fourth generation farmer like Allison, but we actually, this whole row started a group like you guys were talking about earlier, planning, just in case. So anyway, I just think that's interesting that y'all brought that up. That's how we all know each other. But so we are starting a farm. We're first generation farmers. I grew up on a row crop farm in West Tennessee. My husband and I moved about an hour south of Franklin to deer hunt, and then we found you. So we don't do much hunting anymore. We have a lot, like we have grass-fed beef, we have pasture-raised pork, we just bought a milk cow. Charlotte Smith, thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't really have, we have customers, but we don't really have a business plan. And so my question would be for new farmers, he still has a full-time
Yeah, of my books, it would be Your Successful Farm Business. That's the sequel to You Can Farm, but it's a 20-year sequel. It's hard for me to believe that You Can Farm came out 21 years ago. I'm not that old, man. But it's all the stuff we felt like it was all the stuff that we learned in the 2 decades since You Can Farm came out. But the evolution of many, if not most, entrepreneurial businesses is they grow out of hobbies. They just grow out of something that you enjoy. And guess what? Then somebody else likes that duck that you carved or the chair you made or the cheese you made or whatever it is. And you back into it serendipitously. And so don't apologize for, I'm a big believer in feed yourself first. Feed yourself first and find out what you're comfortable with. And then the things that you really are good at. Most people, for example, aren't good at both livestock and plants. They gravitate either toward plants or livestock. Not that, I enjoy the garden, but I really enjoy the animals. And vice versa. Generally, people gravitate, even within plants, people gravitate toward annuals or toward perennials, like toward orchard and brambles and, blackberries and things, as opposed to, squash and lettuce and things like that. So enjoy your hobby. Don't apologize for it. Feed yourself, and you'll ease into what you enjoy doing more. And, I still don't have a business plan. Yeah, if you want to blow your mind, get the little. It's a little entrepreneur's manual called Rework. Rework. It's 2 millennials that did a unicorn company, and it's great. They've got this little it's a quick read. It's like a Seth Godin book, like Purple Cow, and they talk about. I'm not saying you don't have to. I'm not saying you shouldn't have a plan, and it's good to do some planning, but do it and then forget about it, because in 5 years you'll never be doing what your plan was. So it's good to go through the exercise, but it's not necessarily good. Don't feel like you failed if you're not going with your plan. You're going to find out a year or 2 years in, you're going to go, wow, that was stupid to even think we should do that, and so you make those adjustments. Yeah.
Hey, Joe, real quick. The book The E-Myth, does that help sort out some of those things?
Yeah, E-Myth is a great book. Mm-hmm. Yeah, E-Myth is good. And for you guys, Selling the Invisible is another great one. Its point is that today, much of the material that we sell pales in, we're not actually selling an item, we're selling the memory of the item. We're selling the experience of the item. And so as you market, as you tell your story, remember that you might be marketing eggs, but you're selling the idea of health, the idea of healing, and people are buying, they're not buying an egg, they're buying an idea. And Selling the Invisible is a good kind of branch for that.
One more.
Sure.
Kind of along those same lines, and then now that people are interested in the homesteading, and I noticed that there's a lot of people that are either buying the family cow or are buying from someone who has a family cow. What would you say along the lines of drinking raw milk or selling raw milk that, from a safety standpoint, that we should know about? Some just highlights of
Yeah.
safe or selling safe.
Yeah, well, just remember that if your cow is not fed a bunch of concentrates, I would include grain in that. grain, lick, whatever concentrates you can imagine, that your likelihood of having a problem is very, very low if the cow's fed no concentrates. In other words, if she's being treated like a cow, she's having to eat grass or hay and is digesting, fermenting like they're supposed to, there's very little danger there if they're not getting any concentrate feed. Now, I'm not saying you can't give her a little cup full of sweet feed so she'll come in to get milked. All right, I'm talking about challenge feeding where you're feeding them 15 pounds of concentrate to get an extra 2 gallons of milk a day, get more calories in them. So that's one thing. The second thing, of course, is just general cleanliness around your milking area. Strain it. The other thing is to get it cool really, really quick. I know a guy that does raw milk, and he actually freezes. He takes some of these and keeps them in the freezer, and he puts them in his milk bucket, so he milks right into these frozen. And you can almost. I'm a milk snob because I grew up with raw milk, and his milk will stay good for almost a month because it cools down. Temperature, whenever you get around dairy, cheese making, yogurt making, kefir, milk, cottage cheese, everything is about temperature. It's all about temperature. And so getting it chilled very, very quickly is really good. But cleanliness, just wipe them off good. Make sure they don't have a bunch of manure in them, and no concentrates, and that the animal's healthy. You don't want to milk a cow that's got mastitis and things like that.
How much emphasis, though, should be put on all these tests, blood testing and milk testing and all, for diseases and all that kind of stuff? Is that tremendously important?
No, and somebody will say, well, he just, playing Russian roulette with our safety. But again, look, nature is if you run with nature's template, the default position is wellness. It's not sickness. Sickness indicates something wrong. And the number one thing that dairy people do wrong is challenge feeding with concentrates, because then that upsets the rumen, it upsets the acid in the rumen, all sorts of things happen. So eliminate your challenge feeding, go to your forages. Now, there are simple tests. That price has come down. And, the herd share that we have, raw milk's illegal in Virginia, so we have a herd share, and we get our raw milk. He tests every milking, sticks it in the bulk tank, a little strip, and it's 50 cents. 50 cents a milking. Now, he's milking 30 cows. But anyway, it's a 50-cent test for a somatic cell count. Okay, so there's been a lot of technology developed over this. So the little milk lab that you can get, the little self-home milk lab, it's not that expensive now. The technology has made it a lot cheaper. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to say it's under $200, and then you can feel good about it. I will tell you one other thing. And this is becoming an issue in the raw milk community. One of the issues in the raw milk community is that this milk is alive, okay? And so one of the things that is a little bit of a concern is people who come from the city who are completely sterile and then suddenly start chug-a-lugging raw milk. There's nothing wrong with the raw milk, but we're back to this hygiene hypothesis. It hasn't been exercised. There's no microbiome there to handle it. So, depending on the background of a person, it's good to have them start out with a teaspoon, a tablespoon. Go into it gently, okay? And then, and make sure you're okay and build up to it. So that would be one of the problems we have with so many newbies coming to homesteading is, any friend that's a doctor or a vet, or if you go to the extension service and you go to the Orthodox narrative, you're going to be so scared to death you won't even start. And it's unfortunate. And what it is that we now, in our culture, we lack this, whatever, nuanced connection to these most foundational aspects of our food system. I mean, we have customers that ask us, how do you thaw a chicken? You know, how do you make a hamburger? We've been vegetarians for 15 years. My husband wants a hamburger. I don't know how to make one. You know, the level of food ignorance is really, really profound. And so you need to coach. You need to be your coach through.
I'm going to mention Joel's here tomorrow. Go ahead, Matt. Go ahead real quick.
I don't live on a farm. I live in a little suburb in Columbia. I would like to one day, but it's not in the cards at the moment. But to be part of the solution, like those of us, maybe I'm the only disclaimer in the building. But these things are very important to me. So, you know, for people like me, like, what would you recommend for us city dwellers?
All right, I have a three-part recipe. All right, because I'm thrilled that not everybody wants to farm. We'd have a lot fewer customers if everybody wanted to farm. Okay, so I'm thrilled that I love you. Okay, because we are part of your wealth distribution plan, and that's a good thing. So we love moving urban money to the rural areas that are so deprived of economic largesse. We like to call ourselves the reverse trend. We have people living in the city coming out to work at the farm. We have money from the city coming out to the farm. So three things. Number one, do something yourself. I don't care whether it's a little earthworm kit that goes under your sink, or a hanging PVC pipe with pockets in it with herbs growing on your front porch, a beehive on the roof, get rid of the cat, the dog, put in two chickens to eat your kitchen scraps. I'm a big believer in kitchen chickens. And yeah, kitchen chickens. And you know, I mean, if you've got teenagers in the house, there's not a better role model for teenagers than chickens. You know, of all the farm animals, they're the first ones up in the morning. They get up early. They're always happy when they get up. They spend all day turning trash into treasure. And as soon as the sun starts to go down, they go to bed. I mean, what better role model for teenagers? You know, so just do something yourself, just to participate in the mystery and majesty of life. Just so you know it doesn't happen. This is why I'm such a big advocate of children's gardens. You know, kids are growing up today with you know, the video game world, and you know, you drive your car and it wrecks, and you wait 10 seconds and the game gives you a new car. And I think you enter adulthood a very jaundiced view of life when all your mistakes have no real consequence, except you didn't score as many points as, you know, the guy you're playing with. And I think there's just a really humbling, commonsensical, grounding, anchoring thing when you grow that tomato plant from the seed and it comes up and it makes blossoms, and then if you don't take care of it and it dies, or something attacks it and it dies, the garden doesn't give you a new plant. It's for all the marbles. It's for all the things. And I think that's a really important life lesson for kids to go into adulthood. This isn't just a game. This isn't just a video game. And if you mess up, you know, you get a new wife, you get a new tomato, you get a new car, you know, no. It's the real deal, you know. So do something yourself just to participate in the humbling aspect of visceral interaction with our ecological umbilical. Number 2, get in your kitchen. Get in your kitchen. You cannot have an integrity food system and abdicate our visceral responsibility to participate in it. We don't have integrity in any part of our lives. It's very hard for a sector of the culture to have integrity when there's very little participation in it, because that's when you get cheaters. That's when you get, things don't work very well. It's when you get dysfunction. You don't get accountability. And so get in your kitchen. Cook from scratch. Make things from scratch. And again, you can start gently. Literally, we have customers who have never cooked an egg. Well, you can take an egg and you can put it in a pan on the stove and bring it to a boil for 3 minutes, and you can have a hard-boiled egg. Wow, really? That's how they make them? Yeah, that's how they make them. I remember, I'm old enough to remember when you could not go to the store and buy boneless, skinless breast chicken. If you wanted skinless, boneless breast, you had to go buy chicken, and you took it home, took a knife, you cut out the breast, and you took the rest of it and put it in dumplings or, cooked off, picked it, and made casserole or broth or whatever. Today, half of our customers don't know a chicken has bones. They think we go out to the boneless, skinless breast tree and pick apples and pears off the tree. So domestic culinary arts are foundational to just the integrity and accountability of the overall food system. So 1, do something yourself, anything. Number 2, get in your kitchen. And number 3 is to turn off the TV. It'd be fine to use your deer rifle with target practice, and give yourself some time to go find your food treasures in your community, in your area. This might be time you sleuth purveyors on the internet, on websites, and you'll get skilled at it. It may be that you'll, go to farmers market. It could be that you'll join a CSA. It could be that you'll go visit some farmers. But food purveyance is a skill just like any other skill. And the biggest lie we give ourselves, me included, is I want to change this part of my life, but I don't want to make any changes. I don't like this about me, but I don't want to do any changes. That's a lie we feed ourselves. And the fact is, you have to make a choice. If you can't go on doing everything that you've done the way you're doing it and fit in integrity or understanding or knowledge, practical knowledge about food. So you got to go find it. My best story on this was I was up in at the University of Guelph in Ontario doing a seminar with another lady, and she was a high-powered attorney from Toronto. She lived in a 6th-floor condominium in Toronto. And she and her husband, and so I'm just going to tell you her story, a synopsis, the way she told it. She said, my husband and I got pregnant. We're going to have a baby. And we're starting to think about, well, what do we do about this baby? And they decided, well, the first thing they could do is they'd breastfeed. That's a pretty good idea. So she did that. Well, and what else? Well, we gotta protect this baby with good food. We got to get some good food around here. So she and her husband decided to make a list of all of the entertainment and recreational time and money they spend in a year. going to movies, watching TV, going to the ball game, whatever it is. List it down for a year. And then that would be the investment, the time and money investment they would invest in spending a year finding their food. And the goal, now this story is about 15 to 20 years old. It's still the best one. Probably, she couldn't say this today, but at that time it was really cool. And she said, our goal was that at the end of a year, we would not have a barcode in our pantry. Now, barcodes are more ubiquitous today. Probably, that wouldn't work today. But at that time, that was their goal. And she told those students at the University of Guelph, we did it. And what a challenge to me. I'm saying, wow, if this high-powered attorney on a 6th floor in Toronto, big city, could do that, what's my excuse? And it's been a challenge to me ever since, and I've shared the story a million times because doesn't that challenge you? Yeah. And so the truth is, most of us, we want to change. We want a change of our situation, but we don't want to change our situation. We're not willing to invest in the change for our situation. And so investing, taking that entertainment recreational budget and investing it in sourcing our food from integrity sources, that's a one-year investment. And once you get surrounded by this agrarian support group, you're done. You don't have to do that the second year. You do it 1 year and you're good. And maybe it won't take you a year. A place like this, you could probably do it in 3 or 4 months. But they did everything. They bought oats from a grain farmer by the 50-pound bag and ground them. They got a food mill. They got, these things kind of domino. But anyway, it was a great story. So do something yourself. Get in your kitchen. Find your food providers in your area. Those are 3 things that everybody can do and can invest in. And if that happens, we fundamentally change our knowledge, our skill, our mastery, and our relationships. And that's a good investment.
So Joel is here. Tomorrow we're doing a virtual Homesteaders of America conference. I went to it last year. Some of my friends here went. And it's normally in Front Royal, Virginia. And it's one of the bigger conferences of the year that's out there. Yeah. Anyway, it's virtual this year. So rather than Joel doing his keynote speech and mine, from our respective houses, he came here. And we're going to do it here tomorrow. So if someone wants to come, Joel, if you want to come and be part of it so he's not talking to no one, I don't know how we're going to do it. We may be doing it on the floor because we're going to be filming it and sharing it. But his is at 1:30 tomorrow. If you would like to come, we'd love to have 2 people, 10 people, 30 people, 50 people, whatever you guys want. Mine is, I'm mostly speaking on the schoolhouse, and mine's at 4 o'clock. They're an hour long. You're welcome to come join us. Also, another great thing about having Joel here, the lady who runs the conference, her name's Amy Fuel. She is coming here in December, on December 4th and 5th, specifically because you said she's one of the big rock stars in this world and does it really well. Well, she's coming here to spend time, a weekend with us, with her husband, to talk to us about creating our own homesteading conference here, using this facility to have speakers coming in and out for a couple of days, the school, the farm, vendors, all kinds of stuff. So I'm saying that because when she comes, she would love to meet with any people from our community who might want to help us make that happen. It's possible it could happen this spring if things worked out. If not, it could take a lot longer, maybe another year after that. But Heather Houston back there, if you wave your hand, Heather, hopefully she can find a piece of paper and a pen out there by the door, and you can write down your information, and that way when she does come, if you want to help make that happen or be part of that conversation, we would love that. I think that's most of it. I want to ask you two other quick questions. Number one, you mentioned this Rogue Food Conference, road food thing. Maybe just tell them just a couple things that they could go to if they ever wanted to. Are people allowed to go to that? That's going to happen again this fall?
No, we're not going to have it next spring. We were, but with COVID and the hotels all crazy, and John Moody's having his wife is having his, I think their 6th child. He's kind of got his hands full this spring. So we're not going to do it next spring. We did it spring a year ago. No, actually, we did it this spring. We did it back in January or whatever it was in Cincinnati. And we were going to do it again next year. I didn't want to because I like to keep them hungry. I don't like to do stuff, year after year after year. I give a couple, 3 years to. But anyway, he wanted to do it again. Everybody else wanted to do it again. But the Rogue Food Conference, and what it does is it features the templates that people are using around the country to circumvent licensure and regulatory compliance in this food space.
And it's really interesting. There's some people doing some interesting stuff.
Really, really fascinating stuff. And when we did it back in January, first one, we had the conference center was full, and at the end of the day, so we had numerous farmers that were selling illegal food, but they were running the government bureaucrats nuts because they had figured out a loophole, a way to get this done, and it was like drinking out of a Liberty fire hose all day long. And I've never had this happen. I was, John Moody did all the backstory stuff, and I was I did the MC, and we got done at the end of the day, and I, said that's it. That's the end of it. Nobody moved. Nobody moved. They just sat there. I went, started picking up my papers and stuff. Nobody moved. I walked back up to the stage. I said, everybody, it's over. We've been here since 8 o'clock. It's 5 o'clock. It's over. Nobody moved. And I've never had that happen before. And people were we just don't get that, to get that empowerment in our country. It's all about, is it legal? Can I get permission? How much does the license cost? Who do I call to get, permission to do this? Blah, 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 blah. And just go do it. It was really great.
So when that happens again, you'll have to let us know. We'll be watching. Yeah. And you also have you have an event coming up next summer.
Yes.
And I'm going to be at that event at your farm.
Yes.
I'll give you the opportunity.
You'll be singing there.
I will be singing there. There'll be So would you tell them a little bit about your event?
Yeah. So July 16 and 17, it's going to be the Stewardship Festival, and so it'll be 2 days, Friday, Saturday, and you're going to sing on Friday night. And we're shooting for somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 people. And we did a national field day for 20 years, every third year, for 20 years until it grew to about 2,000 people. And this was about 6 years ago, the last one, 6 or 7 years ago, and we just couldn't handle it. It was just too much. And since then, we've acquired the neighbor's property, so now we've got a second entrance, which makes a big difference, in how you traffic flow and park and stuff. Also, some high ground, so it reduced our bottleneck a little bit, and so we've got wonderful people already, agreed to come. We'll be publicizing it a lot more. Elliot Coleman will be there. Those of you who are into gardening, Elliot Coleman is the world guru of gardening. Sally Fallon, Weston A. Price Foundation will be there. These are all people who have already agreed. Diana Rogers, Sustainable Dish, whose book Sacred Cow has just come out, along with the Sacred Cow documentary. Sina McCullough, Dr. Sina McCullough, my co-author of Beyond Labels, a book that just came out about 3 months ago. So there's going to be some good heavy hitters, and the main thing is going to be we're going to be able to do, and of course, tons and tons of vendors. David Schaefer is going to bring up the plant in a box, the federal inspected container retrofitted federal inspected poultry processing unit that he sells. He'll have that there. Of course, there'll be sawmills, but we're planning to feature some stuff that you can't do at a fairground. So much of this stuff is at a fairground, and so we can make charcoal, we can have a fire, we can chip wood, we can cut a tree, we can do things that you can't do very well at a fairground. So yeah, so come July 16 and 17. Love to have you, and we look for a couple of really great days there of just the community of stewardship to get together and encourage one another. One of the nice things about our position in this movement is that we straddle the fence between the commercial and the homesteader. And I love homesteaders, okay? But I also want people who want to make a living on their place and quit the town commute. I want them to do it. And so, of course, Stockman Grass Farmer will be there. It looks like we might, don't know, have the Acres USA bookshelf, whole bookshelf section of Acres USA there. So anyway, there'll be a good smattering of people, and Rory's going to sing. That'll be the highlight of the weekend.
Well, thank you, Joe, for coming and being part of this and sharing an evening with everybody here. It means so much to me and to all of us. And so hopefully you guys can say hello to Joel before. I know he's probably got to be wiped out, but thank you, Joel, for being here with us. Sure.